Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to introduce our SGS webinar, Essential Training for ESG Sustainability Challenges. Today's webinar will cover a brief introduction into who SGS is, 5 North American drivers, 6 key business challenges, 5 steps in the ESG sustainability cycle, essential training for each step, next steps, and an opportunity for Q&A. My name is Kim LaFrancois, and I'm the Regional Sales Manager for the industrial sector here at SGS. I've been in the testing, inspection, and certification industry for nearly 10 years, working with many different clients throughout various industries. The other speaker joining me today is Adam Hammis. Adam is the ESG Director at SGS and has 20 years experience as corporate ESG sustainability consultant, author, and instructor. Adam has founded multiple organizations and comes with an MBA with international education and leadership experience, integrating ESG and sustainability into corporate strategy. His numerous professional qualifications make him a fantastic resource for SGS and for our partners. I'll pass it over to Adam so we can dive right in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for coming today. I'm excited that you're excited about this topic, and so I will be brief. You know, if you haven't heard of SGS, hopefully you have. We are the world's leading inspection, verification, testing, and certification company, recognized as a global benchmark for quality and integrity. We have been around for 140 plus years, have 96,000 employees and 2,700 offices, and that means we can serve clients very well. Sustainability has been embedded in our company and our values and business principles from the CEO to the bottom for a very long time. We're not new at this. We have 25 plus years of sustainability, specific sustainability experience, and we're participating in a lot of the creation of and the continuous improvement of the standards and things that are driving the industry today. So we're proud of not only what we've participated in, but our leadership as far as operating and walking the walk. Anything that can rate different companies on their performance ranks us very high, with from EcoVadis to DJSI, ISS, MSCI, Sustainalytics, CDP. We participate in all of it. We get ranked very highly, and we're proud of that. And it also allows us to help our customers do the same. So jumping in for participation, just want to make sure that we care about you and where you're at. We just start off with a very basic question. Have you and your organization published an annual ESG/sustainability report? Yes, no, or I don't know. And it's just one good barometer to see where you're at in the process as we talk about training for a broad topic like ESG and sustainability. So I'll give you a few seconds and to submit, and then we will jump ahead. But take your time. It's pretty straightforward. It's the easiest question that I'll tell you that we have today. Yes, no, or I don't know. And don't be afraid. All of those usually are pretty balanced. If you don't know, maybe your client or your company hasn't actually put one out yet. So I'll give it a few more seconds because I see the answers rolling in. And we'll see where everyone is. Yes is the answer for us. We have published, we have an integrated report as well as a sustainability report. It's pretty lengthy, but there are also highlight documents you can find online for SGS. So here, let's have a look. So we have a great group here. It's very typical. 38% have, 43% no, and 19% we don't know yet. So usually if it's online, go check out your company website, or you hopefully would have heard an announcement from the company, but not always. But you are not alone. So let's talk about the drivers. Why is ESG and sustainability continuing to not only take off, but grow at a pretty increasing rate? Number one are ESG ratings. And so publicly traded companies for quite some time have been rated, whether they wanted to or not, by different agencies, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, MSCI, ISS, Sustainalytics, EcoVadis, and that's driving change. Investors are looking at those scores to different degrees, and they are making decisions. And now that those scores are public, companies want to take an effort and either improve their scores or at least maintain those scores. Number two is supply chain customers. So even if you're not a large or medium-sized publicly traded company, You might be in the supply chain of someone who is. And one of the things that has shifted over only the past 3 to 5 years is that more and more focus is put on larger companies' supply chain, because so much of what happens and the impacts are in their supply chain. And so now they are being scored or evaluated, maybe not an official ranking, but they're being asked by stakeholders to say, how is your supply chain being managed? And if there's a lot of risk or impacts in that supply chain, they expect them to be managing it appropriately. And so that is trickling down to small and medium-sized privately held companies that are in the supply chains of larger brands, and it is not going away. Typically, a lot of, we even see supplier mandates sometimes, definitely if you're a tier 1 supplier. A lot of those focus on CDP, which is purely a climate disclosure, or EcoVadis, which is pretty popular and growing. That's more of a broad ESG score. And so it's changing things of who is participating in these kind of conversations. North American driver 3, I will say this is North America. Regulation, you might be surprised that that's third, but we are easily 5 years behind, definitely Europe, but South America, East Asia, far more aggressive policies and regulations on ESG topics. The things that have moved the most recently for the USA are only proposed rules. People expect that the U.S. federal supplier climate risks and resilience rule that came out from the White House during COP27. We expect that to pass at the end of the month in February, and that's just for suppliers of the federal government. And then the SEC ruling has been delayed in court, which pretty much everyone expected, and it will still likely be approved in about a year after those legal dealings proceed. But again, those are very climate related and not ESG, broad environmental, social, and governance. And so we're just not as aggressive as some of those other places. But if you are in the supply chain or you do business in Europe, South America, East Asia, you are also impacted by international regulations. Here's a quick breakdown. I'm not going to spend a ton of time today, but there's a breakdown of the federal supplier rule is really targeting some of those the largest contractors, and there's different levels and tiers that you can be in, and as well as this SEC ruling, there was a delay, so it's quite a bit of a lead-in to prepare for those things. As aggressive as everyone maybe talks about it, it's quite a bit of time to prepare, especially with the delay in the legal proceedings for the SEC ruling. And a distant fourth and fifth, this is really, with ESG, which is very risk-based, you're going to see a lot less of consumer demand, but with sustainability, which is more of the good for the world, more idealistic type of stuff, there's actually large consumer markets for those, aggressive, especially in consumer products and consumer services, where there's actually a low-cost lifestyles of health and sustainability consumer segment now that's been well identified and researched for several years, actually for a decade now. And it's a huge market worldwide. In the US, it continues to grow, Japan, New Zealand, and they're tracking it quite a bit because people are willing to, definitely with price parity, choose a product that is more environmentally or socially responsible, or pay even more money for a product that is more environmentally or socially responsible. And then employees, again, this is definitely less in the ESG, which is more of a risk-based approach. And then the sustainability, though, if you're with a company that has very passionate values or vision or mission, your employees are going to expect a lot out of you. And especially employees, we're talking very different from frontline workers at a factory to more like the high-level, white-collar, skilled positions that are difficult to fill. It actually has a much stronger impact because those people can choose where they want to work. And having a strong ESG and sustainability record does impact those people more so. So those are the drivers. What is your organization's number one driver, or just what do you believe it is if you haven't done the research for ESG and sustainability performance? Typically, I'll be very clear, it's usually not just one, it's a mix, but there's a prioritization. But what is your number one? Do you think you're publicly traded and you want ESG ratings to be improved for investors? Do you have a big supply chain customer that you're trying to make happy? Are you just trying to stay up with regulations and you want to make sure that you're not behind? Are you in the consumer market that you're really driving and your customers and clients expect you to do that? Or is it your employees? It's just a talent strategy that you really believe if you're going to recruit and retain the right talent, you've got to be more aggressive in your ESG and sustainability, not only performance, but disclosure. Or it could be something else, could be other, but those typically tend to be the top 5. Give you a few more seconds. I see the numbers still going up, so I don't want to stop anybody from participating. Give you about 5, 6 more seconds. All right. So again, really nice balance. It's not surprising that employees is not as high, but there's some other, which I love. If you want to put them in the chat, what you think your other would be, we'd love to just share that with the group. And we have, let's see, I want to make sure I'm not muted, but somebody's asking if I'm muted. I think it would be yours. Can people hear me? Type in the chat just to make sure I'm not blabbing on, but I'm definitely not muted. And there's any free certificate for the webinar. I think, no, we don't typically for our webinars. Summer can answer in my chat, but we're not giving certificates for this specifically. Okay, thanks for saying you can hear everybody, but it's a nice balance. And I think, I just want to say it's critical that you know what your driver is, because you will create an ESG and sustainability strategy that matches what's driving this. It's different if it's just for investors. It's different than if it's just for a supply chain customer. You really need to know what your mix is, and that's going to create a good strategy. So now let's talk about this 5-step ESG cycle that every organization really needs to go through. And every cycle, every time you cycle through these 5 steps, you get more mature as an organization in every step. And if you skip any of these steps, it's not the end of the world, but it does elevate the risk, and it does, I would say, impact the quality of your program. So let's just talk about them in brief, and it's awareness that you really need to understand a lot. So your ESG is a big environmental, social, and governance. Sustainability issues are broad, and no one knows everything about all of them. So it's really, what are your most important trends, issues, strategies that you can look at your peers. And then once you look at that, you're going to prioritize. You're never going to have perfect information, but you do have to identify who you're trying to make happy, who are your stakeholders, what's material to them, and then what are your risks versus your opportunities. And then you strategize. You actually create a strategy that takes all of that into consideration. It has vision, KPIs, goals, and plans, and then you execute. You have to have key initiatives, projects, and manage those over time to see performance improve. And then how are you going to report that and tell your story? It's communication, disclosure, not only of performance, but also how you're managing it. People often want to know your management approach to all of those things. And these are color-coded because the first 3 steps in that cycle are really an internal opportunity for leadership to review everything, to have difficult conversations before sharing externally. The execution phase is really mostly internal stakeholders and close business partners. They're going to see you doing things differently and be impacted, but you're not telling the world yet. But in the reporting phase, you're possibly putting out an annual report. Maybe it's just direct disclosure to specific stakeholders or certification bodies, whatever it happens to be, but you are intentionally creating communications out to the larger world. And then it starts all over again, and you revisit each of those steps and continue executing and reporting. So it's important to know that there's role-based leadership that exists at each step, and your training should target those appropriate roles. So let's talk about that. There's a strategist role. Usually those first 3 steps are done by higher level leaders, and they're developing strategy for the overall company. What are our most important environmental, social, and governance issues, and create strategy around that. So as a strategist, you have board of directors, you have chief executives, you have senior VPs and directors. Often if there's a dedicated director of ESG and sustainability, that position is growing more and more popular. They are on that senior ESG and sustainability committee. And often you'll have legal counsel because a lot of these are risk issues and compliance issues first, even before they become feel-good issues. So that's important. In the execution phase, you're really talking about the implementers. It can vary, but they're middle level lower level, they're in a department sometimes, they're working on a specific issue or initiative. There's project managers, operations managers. There's often a lot of cross-functional subject matter experts who are brought in to really solve complex problems. And there's often risk and quality managers involved as well. And that's the day-to-day doing and improving what is the company's performance. And then you're a reporter, possibly. You're a communications department person. You're in marketing. You might be in investor relations, a very specific type of reporter, government affairs, or even legal compliance. And all those people craft carefully accurate and well thought out communications to the different stakeholders that want to know how you're performing. So if you can put yourself in one of those categories, it's very important because that helps determine what kind of training you'll need. So which steps of the ESG and sustainability cycle fit strongest with your individual role at your organization? Are you a high-level leader, a strategist that might be in all those conversations, creating the overall strategy for the company, steps 1 through 3? Are you an implementer? Are you assigned to climate action or diversity, equity, and inclusion or water management? Are you really in the weeds, helping the company improve their performance on a specific topic or issue? Or are you reporting? Are you trying to tell that story for the organization to key stakeholders? Are you making sure it's legally compliant, or are you making sure it's very inspirational? Are you on that 5th step as a reporter? And that's important. You might have a foot in each, but it's not common unless you're a director of ESG that you're going to do all 3. And even if you're a director of ESG and sustainability, you probably don't do all 3 the way that others do. You sort of coordinate between all of them, and you're a spoken hub person that really helps get everything done collectively, and you keep the big picture in mind. So I'll give you about 5 more seconds. I see answers coming in. Thank you for your responses. And here we go. And that's great. Today we've got a little more of the strategists and the implementers, a little less of the reporters. I think that's unfortunate, but it's true. I think that it would be great if we saw more people in legal compliance, in investor relations, even in marketing and communications, really understanding the technical side because of the greenwashing ramifications and some of the rules and standards that exist. They're getting more aggressive and trying to prevent greenwashing if you keep watching the news. And so it's important to have those people from your organization in the conversation early, so they're not doing what typically you do, which is fluff things up, spin it well, put a bright bow on everything. That's actually a risk. And you want to be very accurate. You want to tell a good story, but you don't want to risk overinflating or distracting from some other thing, which is the definition of greenwashing. So let's talk about training. If you know where you're at in the company and what your role is, it is critical that ESG or sustainability training fits the role that is being trained. You shouldn't try to give everybody the same kind of training. There can be some very early, broad training, but you need to give individual roles very specific, detailed, role-specific training for their job. Otherwise, you're wasting time and money and resources for the organization. So first thing, if you look at the strategist role, and all 3 steps are really the strategist, the same group, the same senior level ESG committee, or whatever you want to call it. That's typically what it's called. There might be a working group or something like that, council, but they're really going to focus on 3 things that are most important, most common. It's what is ESG training around ESG stakeholder engagement, not only what that term means, but the standards involved, how to do it effectively, how to reduce risk but capture opportunity, ESG frameworks and standards that exist, not only just the ones you've heard of, but ones that might apply to you that you've not heard of. And then ESG ratings, not only for yourself if you're publicly traded, but you understand which ones could apply to you even if you're not publicly traded, or they apply to some of your other stakeholders and they want you to be involved in those kind of ratings, even if you don't have to by law. And so that's the kind of training that you would be looking at as a strategist from someone like a senior ESG committee. So let's talk about those. ESG stakeholder engagement, the best training by far comes from the accountability group, and they're called AA 1000 for short as their standards. They have a module A, B, and C training, as well as you can continue with experience working in stakeholder engagement to basically develop a credential that they offer. But AA 1000 has 3 standards. It's great training, and it's really about the stakeholder engagement process, how to do it effectively, how to avoid risk, how to approach different, complex, difficult stakeholders, and really do it strategically for the business. Frameworks and standards, there's really a lot. Not all of them offer training. So the ones that have the best training that actually kind of blend into and help you learn about other standards as well. They're not self-serving, which I like. I highly recommend GRI and SASB. They have something called a Certified GRI Professional Credential that takes you through. Definitely you learn about the GRI standards themselves and where they came from, but they blend in things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, crossover with things like SASB. It's a very comprehensive GRI professional credential. And there's also a very comprehensive Fundamentals of Sustainability Accounting, the FSA credential. Level 1 is a great intro level if you're just anybody interested in reporting. It's got history, it has fantastic research background. It's just very comprehensive, and that it does take a little bit of time. Level 2, though, that's only if you are actually an analyst in finance. If you're analyzing companies and you want to integrate ESG factors into your analysis, that's a very comprehensive training for level 2. But those are the kind of the best, the gold standard if you're looking for frameworks and standards. Good to have somebody on your team who has one or both of those for sure. ESG ratings agencies, I would just say that this is one of the criticisms. The rating agencies are privately held companies that are serving investors mostly, and they do not train people in how to use their stuff. It's actually pretty proprietary. They'll offer paid services, and they would just, if they did that, they would just help you improve your score. So MSCI will help you improve your MSCI score if you pay them. Same thing with ISS, EcoVadis, Sustainalytics. We have in the SGS Academy a set of courses. There's actually 4 modules, and that we do tell you big picture. We dive into each of them, how they're different, how they're similar, how to approach them, ways to improve your score without maybe spending all the money that they would charge you. But it's a little different approach, but it's very big picture to help you understand which of them might be most important for you. And so if you want to look at our courses, these are the 4 that are specifically for ESG. Foundation course is actually just a 2-hour, it's now video on demand. It's our prerequisite for all the courses. And this is really for that strategist group, materiality and strategy, module 2. The next time we offer it is February 22nd. It's a 1-day course, and I am one of the instructors, but it covers a lot of things, and it's very in-depth. So mostly the feedback is like, that was a lot. It's very helpful. And we're not trying, like we said, we're not trying to train you in any one thing. We're trying to help you understand the entire ecosystem so that then you can take the next steps, because you might decide that GRI isn't the direction you're going to head and you're going to just use SASB, or vice versa, or only one of the rating agencies is really the one that you care about the most. So then you'll learn that and then dive into that. And, we welcome you to go on to the next thing and get a little more experience, but we do feel really good. We get great reviews on all of our training. So next is if you're in execution, and even if you're not in execution, if you know people on your team, it's really good to take this information back to them, because they're looking at things like just project management skills 101. That may not sound like ESG and sustainability training, but I just implore everyone to say you should have a skilled project manager on your team, especially if it's ESG, you think it's a material issue for your company. It's not just a marketing promotional thing. You should have talented project managers on every initiative. Management standards, these are more in the weeds standards on specific issues, which we'll talk about some examples, but then also target standards. These are, if you're going to actually set goals, it's good to know that there are actually standards out there for how you set goals, and that those goals are sort of internationally recognized, and you're not basically greenwashing and setting goals that are not really that relevant or that are not industry standard, and that you're going to kind of put yourself in a very weird position to try to explain why are you doing it that way when the entire world has already kind of got on board and is doing it a different way. So what that can look like. Project management is you absolutely, I think PMI is just known for their project management professional credential. It's one of the best. And I struggle to put this into the project management side of things, but we do dive into modules 1 and 3, which I'll tell you about for execution. We go through a lot of very ESG and sustainability specific project management issues. We don't give you a project management professional background, but we kind of assume that you have one. And we talk about some very specific sustainability ESG issues within module 3. Management standards, I'm only giving you about 3 examples out of 1,000, but it's really important that if you choose a material topic like climate action, that you know ISO as a great example. They're just the international standard, standard setting body. They're well respected, and they have an ISO 14064 for greenhouse gas. So if you're doing climate change, you should really understand what is the ISO standard for that. If you're in health and safety, worker wellness, anything like that is really important to really familiarize yourself with ISO 45001, because it's the most important or most relevant ISO standard. There is a governance for the G side. It's actually more like anti-bribery for ISO 37001. It's good to know what those are, even if you're not going to become an ISO certified company, to understand how others are measuring it, what their management systems look like, because you're going to be competing against your peers who are at times using these same things. But there are plenty of other management standards. Just Google standards for climate action and you'll find dozens. But then targets, you actually have very specific target setting standards, if you didn't know that. The science-based targets from the Science-Based Institute, SBTI, that is if you're going to set climate reduction goals, most people internationally are setting them in line with what's called science-based targets to meet the Paris Treaty targets that the scientific community said we needed, which was a 50% reduction in absolute emissions by 2030, and then being climate neutral by 2050. And they have a standard that says, here's how you would measure that, and your targets would be in line with a science-based Paris level target. And if you don't, then you have to often get into an explaining war with people of like, well, here's why we did it differently, and we didn't like their standards, so we went this other direction. And that's not necessarily the best conversation to be in, especially if you're trying to promote your organization. PAS 2060 is a carbon neutrality or a climate neutral standard that not only takes the other standards into consideration, but it has a lot of carbon credits and renewable energy, how to calculate and do or do not count those towards your offsets, and be able to claim carbon neutral as a company. Others, AWS is a water stewardship standard, often for kind of larger manufacturing or industrial sites, but it can work for almost anyone. It's a fantastic format for setting water stewardship goals. And then TRUE is a great zero waste standard for tracking and measuring and being able to claim that you have a zero waste operations. There are others, and pretty much you pick a topic and you will have target standards that exist for that topic. Like I said, just here's a sample. We have that video on demand. It's the prerequisite, but you can take management and execution from us on SGS Academy. And we go through several things. I'll just kind of read them out, but we talk about these 5 stages of performance that all ESG and sustainability initiatives kind of move through and evolve through in higher levels of performance. We talk about choosing leadership, interesting and very unique data collection and storage strategies, different analytical tools, how to set policies and targets, KPIs, how to unique funding of projects that are ESG and sustainability related, and how companies have managed to do that, and also just evaluation and review of those projects. So it's not a project management certificate, but it is a fantastic kind of addendum to anyone who is going to be project managing for an ESG and sustainability project. Then I just realized that somebody's typing questions. So James, sorry for the delay. Can you send a link to this course? Very interested in taking it. There will be links to all of our courses for SGS Academy. Also, the other ones, I think you'll get slides in an email after this. So you can just Google, GRI professional or certified GRI professional. And if you Google them, I promise you'll find them. What are the standards to set goals? We did cover some of those, but what would be a typical ESG goals for retail, and what are the standards, if any? It just depends, Jelena. For ESG goals for retail, a lot of folks are looking at climate is sort of across the board, very important for everybody right now. But you're looking at products. Sometimes you're doing very specific product like sourcing, material sourcing. Sometimes it's supply chain management. How many of your tier 1 suppliers are certified to a different environmental or social third-party standard. But there's quite a few. We can't go into all of them today, but when you get into any one particular topic, we can dive into that. And it's just, we can't cover all of them today, but I wish we could. And then last, the 5th step is the reporting. So if you're a reporter, again, this could be communications, marketing, investor relations, government relations, or legal compliance, you're really going to talk about 3 things: greenwashing risks, how to avoid them, what are the reporting standards specifically for creating reports, and then assurance, because assurance is becoming more and more a differentiator, not only expected by stakeholders, but it's just an incredible confidence builder for your internal team to know that you are doing things up to standard, and you've received assurance from a third party, which, we say that we are an assurance provider, but we honestly believe that strongly, and you'll find that if you talk to your stakeholders, it's becoming just a growing concern, definitely of the investor community, but just all around. So, greenwashing risks. I will say in the US, definitely the FTC green guides are sort of the Bible for everything greenwashing. If you look at the how to recycle, and the number 2 recycle campaign, it's the best example of developing a labeling program based absolutely on the green guides and how not to greenwash. But we have an SGS Academy course for reporters. It's our module 1 and 4, which we'll talk about, but it's very specific issues of how reporting individuals need to understand their key issues. If you get into actual reporting standards, especially if you know you're going to report and align with that standard, if you want to have a report that is compliant to a particular reporting standard, you need to eventually take that training. And there's a Fundamentals of Integrated Reporting certificate with the IR, the Integrated Reporting Foundation. Now that's actually in IFRS, but it's still kind of both. They're absorbing into IFRS. The business reporting on the SDGs, that's actually just a downloadable 100-some page PDF with guidance from the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The Certified GRI Professional is a great, not only strategy course, but it's great for reporting as well. And so is that FSA credential. Fantastic for both strategy and reporting. And then assurance, it's really the top 2 standards you should understand for report assurance for ESG and sustainability are ISA E3000 and then AA 1000. And you can read the standard ISA E3000 and you can take the modules A, B, and C training through AA 1000. And those standards are just they're just the go-to standard. ISAE is for everything, including the KPIs, is how to approach non-financial disclosure and provide assurance for non-financial disclosures. And AA 1000 is specifically on the stakeholder engagement piece and how you created the report and what was in it. So it's kind of context versus content, and they work very well together. Here is, again, just from us that we have available on SGS Academy online, the Disclosure and Communication Module 4 course. We talk about very real greenwashing risks and examples of those financially and brand-wise. We do 5 stages of communication and how to evolve into higher and higher levels of performance, internal versus external communications, voluntary versus mandatory, all the different tools for building trust, certification, verification, framework standards, and we go through it in quite a bit of detail. And so that is for step 5. That course is coming out in February 24th. And then I would just say, somebody says, can you expand on what you said on the H2R label? Yes, Zulema, how to recycle, HOW, the number 2, recycle, in all one, there's no spaces. If you see the new recycling labels, especially in the US, but sort of internationally, they're these modular kind of pieced together labels that break down all the pieces. It's just everything about it. It's trying to make it as simple as possible, but it conveys a ton of information. There's a link back to more information on websites, and it's just incredibly user-friendly and no confusion. And it's replacing the just 3 triangle recycle symbol that could mean anything. It could mean, yeah, we encourage you to recycle, but this isn't recyclable. Or it could mean, this is recyclable, please recycle it. Or it could mean this has a certain percentage of recycled content inside, but we're not going to tell you how much. And it's really the new wave of where everyone's adopting this how to recycle labeling for their packaging. And I highly recommend checking out. It's based directly off of the FTC Green Guides. There's actually a European portion that came out. I just read about it this morning, but it's a new sustainability financial disclosure, SFDR, I think, reporting. Anyway, but it's all about greenwashing as well. So it's going to be more comprehensive, and it's trying to prevent greenwashing or whitewashing on social issues. It's not easy, greenwashing. We just use it for all of ESG and sustainability, including social and governance issues, but it's kind of made for the environmental movement. But just to know that it's out there, the more people jump in and participate and do ESG and sustainability performance and reporting, the more likely it is people get very sensitive to how people try to communicate things that are not quite true, or leave out very big, important issues that they're trying to, greenwash around, or just distract from their actual bigger issue is something else, but they put all their attention on this very tiny thing. There's a bunch of issues around greenwashing that companies should be aware of, because your traditional marketing and communications person is taught to do the opposite, and they will get you in a lot of trouble and in hot water with the public by saying things that are great and flowery and they sound like we're saving the world. And then there's a bunch of pushback, especially on social media and from specialist groups that that really know their stuff. So, great question. Angela says, "How is the uptake?" I'd say it's strong and only increasing. And even just from going to our local convenience stores, I just see it. I used to work a lot for the convenience store industry and do a lot of consulting there as well. And I've just seen the uptick is fast, just picking stuff up off the shelf and seeing definitely in retail consumer products. And they're really for users, like individuals who are picking up one piece of this, like a soda can or a box or something. But it's being used as well for industrial and commercial applications. We do have other solutions. This isn't a webinar about this is a webinar about training, but we do offer actual services in scoring, assessment, reporting, report assurance, certification, and climate action. We do a lot of verifications and carbon neutral claims. So if you're ever looking for something, SGS, or a giant company, boots on the ground all over the world, and we have a lot of highly technically specialized people. We have GHG training modules as well. If you're really looking for GHG training, that's not what this particular training and webinar is about, but want to make sure that you know that we have that available to you. And I can back up at any time. And I feel like I ran through that really fast, but that's usually my intention. I just want to answer questions that you have for me about ESG and sustainability training that you would be interested in taking for you or your team, so that you can help your organization succeed.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. As always, you did a fantastic job of weaving a lot of those questions into your presentation. It looks like at this point, we just have one more that has been unanswered. The question is, do we need training now, or should we wait and see what happens with some of the new proposed rules?
Good question. The proposed rules, typically what I think of are what we talked about, the White House U.S. federal supplier rule. I wouldn't wait for that. If you're a supplier, I would get CDP training, climate. It's very specific climate action training. Look at ISO 14064, the GHG protocol, anything with climate, look into it because that's what it's focused on. And it's not really up for debate. There's going to be some public comment, but they expect that to be passed even by the end of this month. And that will be for all federal suppliers. If you're larger, you have more concern. If you're smaller, you've got a little less. But it's still actually an incredible opportunity to go through that because CDP and even reporting to that, it's just a ton of great information for your operations, and you can identify a ton of opportunities for cost savings, efficiencies, things like that. So don't wait. If you're looking at the SEC ruling, it's still, by all accounts, everyone that I know and everyone that's familiar with it, nothing's changing. Everything's as expected. They didn't expect it to pass in December. They expected there to be legal challenges, and then it'll probably pass sometime later this year after those legal challenges have been run through, and then there might be some tweaks, but it's likely going to continue. It's driven by the investor community. Internationally, other folks have done that far before us. It's not going away. So if you want to wait a little bit, you're just going to be waiting to do the same thing. So I would get ahead of your competitors and get ready for it, especially if you think it applies to you and the size of your organization. And it's the same thing. It's climate only. It is learn about ISO 14064, learn about CDP, learn about the greenhouse gas protocol. Those are really valuable things to understand anyway. There are two issues internationally that are not going away, and one is environmental, climate change, and biodiversity is kind of a coming in second. There's a lot of attention being put on that, but socially it's more like diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as like supply chain management in the supply chain with like health and human rights. So just know that those things they're on a hockey stick, up, not down, and please do get trained. Just know that we told you. That's what we told you to do. Any other questions?
Yes. What advice?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. We've got a question. What advice? Sorry, Adam. I've got a little delay in my video, so I'll let you go through the questions.
Okay. Lucretia says, does SGS have someone who can answer questions about organic labeling? Yes, just email me after this. I'm sure we do. James says, what advice would you provide to EHS professionals with ever expanding roles in ESG? James, this is my take. If you're an ESG professional and an ever expanding role, the best thing to do is go to the top and learn about the broader ESG issues, the highest, because that's the highest level. And then you will understand why your company is identifying priorities that they are identifying, because your company will never do everything. There's too many issues to handle. You're going to prioritize 5, 6, 7, 8 issues. And knowing why you did that and what the standards and the drivers are is very helpful. But then you will come back and dive into those issues and do more of the in the weeds stuff, which we talked about both today. But I would start at the top and really understand, because you'll be able to participate. You'll be a contributor to those conversations. Even if you don't sit on the senior ESG committee, you will give them some really good feedback, and maybe you'll get promoted to that committee in the future. But they need people who understand both the high level and in the weeds. And so I would do both. I would start high level and then figure out which material issues are most a priority for your organization, and then only study those. Tashnia says, at the operations level, who would need ESG training, or how could I identify who would need ESG training? Great question. So Tashnia, the people, ideally, this is how it happens. It's not perfect, but an ideal situation is the senior committee or senior levels who are driving it. They should have a senior committee. They should do the training first. They should figure out at the strategic level, what standards are they following? What are their drivers? What are their issues? and they should create a strategy that they then champion for like mid-level management and lower level implementers. And that is what should determine who, because if climate change is the main issue, for instance, it's very popular, you can identify quickly, well, where are our impacts and who should be involved because of climate change. But if it's water, they might be a completely different department, it might be completely different individuals. But the short answer is the topic that is material determines who should get the training. At the top level, senior leadership should get the training regardless, or if there's a specific role that has been tasked with leading that charge, they should take the training themselves and then identify that senior committee, because you shouldn't just, you can't have an ESG and sustainability strategy from the bottom up. You can have issues, but they will never be strategic unless they come from leadership. And so leadership needs to decide what is strategic, what are the priorities or material topics. And there should be a short list of, not 30. There should be maybe 8 or 5 or 12, but it should not be 30, and it should probably not be 20. And you should have some priorities, and then leadership will tell people why those are priorities. Therefore, you will know who should be involved, because whoever is actually capable of making change within the organization, who leads that particular department, or the subject matter experts who would be able to contribute, you're going to have to create that team based on what is actually material. So it depends, but you really have to flow it from the top. So if you're that person who's going to be in charge, you should take the training, but then you should get the other people in senior leadership first bought in before getting a bunch of other lower level people training, and they may never actually have support for doing anything within the company. Christopher says, will the diversity and inclusion piece create an affirmative action environment in workplaces? Good question, Christopher. No, I think that the key word in almost all these situations is representation. There's really not a lot of target setting within diversity and inclusion. There is a missed opportunity. Like, are we working in a place and serving clients, and we know what the demographics, if there's 70% Latino and 60% women, and we have 5% women and 1% Latino in our workforce, that's just it's actually a risk. It's like, how are we serving our clients if we actually don't look like or represent? We're probably not either putting out information about hiring practices. It may not be discrimination, but it just could be we don't know what we don't know, and we're losing out on a huge workforce and a representative workforce that could possibly sell better to the clients that they understand, because they're from that culture or from that gender or age. Diversity is a number of things, but it should never be necessarily affirmative action, or quotas are often illegal. It's really about representation. What is the community that we serve and work in? And if we look at our demographics of our company, is there a glaring difference in our workforce than in the communities that we live and do work in? So that's my best answer. And I'm not a diversity professional, but I've worked in that space enough to give that basic answer. A recent forum I attended gave me the impression that diversity officers will be able to have more teeth than in the past. Yes, I don't think that that's necessarily a regulatory thing, but it's not going away. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is part of it. Is the research that's just showing how financially material it is to most companies, and that the research is pretty straightforward. Is if representation is missing or glaringly skewed, you are not as competitive in a lot of different ways. And so that is probably why diversity officers are going to have more teeth. I think the standards are also getting better and more aligned, and they're providing more structure for how to approach a DEI initiative. It should not be, the word is performative. You should not just have a bunch of events and donate to some organizations. It's about, what does your workforce look like? And are you the kind of company that diverse groups of people don't want to work for? And are there reasons for that? And so that's just, understanding a few of those key terms of what makes a good program and what doesn't, I'd say is the difference maker. But great questions. I think that was it. Anyone who want to unmute themselves, you can take an audio question, but otherwise we might be to the end. I just want to thank everybody for your question, all your great questions. Just one more question. During the review, we'll be able to see the questions asked during the session. The recording, yes, Dan. Heard the DOJ is working with SEC to implement enforcement rules. Yeah, I believe if they're going to approve the SEC climate disclosure ruling, they will have to have some enforcement rules and what that looks like. And it will probably be the Department of Justice. But I'm not a lawyer, so don't quote me on that. But yes, SEC will have an enforcement portion of that, and what are the penalties or punishments for not being in compliance. Great questions. I'm sorry I missed a couple of those. I had to go back. Do we need training now, or should we wait to see if something? Oh, we already read that one. Okay, we're done. Christopher says thank you. Julie says thank you. Adam, I say thank you to everyone for your time. I appreciate it. Go out there, do great things with ESG and sustainability, please, and let us know if you need help.
Thanks so much, Adam, for the presentation. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Please feel free to reach out to Adam or myself. You can find our contact information on this slide. Otherwise, we hope everybody has a great day. Thanks so much.